All right, hello everyone. So today we're going to talk a little bit how I organize my composable functions and how I'm making them more generic and more reusable. Now, first I'm going to give a visual demonstration, and essentially it's what I've created here in Figma. You can go ahead and skip this section if you want. I'll leave time codes down below, but I just wanted to do this because essentially it gives a clear demonstration of what we're actually trying to do, and essentially it's what was going on inside of my head when I was trying to organize my composables a bit better. Now, as you can see here, we have three parts. We have these builders, we have these parts, we have implementations. Now, I'm not going to go into too much details. I'll go into more details when we actually start talking about the code, but essentially each individual composable is going to be broken down into a part, say a header, a message, or a button. We're going to then take those parts, put those into a builder, and this builder is going to be using the slotting layout. Again, we'll talk more about that into when we actually get inside the code here in a quick second. We can then go ahead and we'll then take those builders that we've created with those parts. We're then going to put those inside of an implementation. Now, the implementation differs from the builder. The builder will use the slotting layout. Again, we'll talk about that more later. The implementation is just going to give us a nice clean API, and then we can use that implementation anywhere inside of our code. So yeah, basically the main difference between the implementation and the builder is that it just allows for that very sleek, that very clean API. And I don't really like the slotting layout, especially when you're using a ton of composables. It just doesn't look clean. Right, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of a better understanding, or at least a visual that you can refer back to when you're trying to organize your own code. Right, with that being said, let's jump into Visual Studio and let's start talk a bit about how this is actually going ahead. Now, I'll leave a link down in the description below to my actual GitHub here. As you can see, I've got it all documented up as proper GitHub code should be. Right, so the key to our organization here is going to be these object declarations, right? You can see object system chats. Now, this isn't new. I've actually read about it, and you can read about it online. Just Google how to organize composable code. But essentially what it allows us to do is essentially write object declaration, create a new class, and this class is going to, we create this class called system chats, and it's just going to help us very easily organize our code. Now, this first layer here, which is inside this object declaration, this is where all our implementations are going to live. If you actually scroll down, you can see that we're actually have quite a few here. And then you'll also notice that we're using this builder class, right? This Twitch IRC system notification builder .system chat. You'll see we're doing it the exact same thing again, right? System chat. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, that's just code reuse, right? Why don't you just, go ahead and copy this? And as you can see, we're doing it on the resub message. We could actually go ahead and we could just copy this. Then we could scroll down where we're using it, right? This resub message. This is where I'm actually using my implementations in my code. And we could just paste it. Now, technically, this is the same code, but you'll see it'll probably start to throw some errors here. Yeah, because technically I've put in some visibility modifiers that make sure that myself or other people can't do this. But essentially, this is the same thing. If I just took off those visibility modifiers, it would work. But notice how you can't tell what's going on anymore, right? You can just say, okay, it's a builder, it's got system chat, okay, it's got a header, it's got a text, and it's very messy, right? And essentially, compared to this with this announcement message, right? It's just a lot cleaner to look at. So we'll actually do some Command Z's here, right? So that's exactly why I have these implementations essentially differ from the builder classes, which we'll talk about a bit later. But just know that while this does seem like a lot of code reuse, and it really does, it just allows for the cleaner API use, specifically the system chat.resub message. And then anyone reading this code, right, they could just say, okay, this is a resub message. And then on top of that, right, I also have it all documented, and then they could go into even hover over systems chat, right? And then it's like, holy, they understand that they're using this, what a system chat is and what they're using it for. So I really like that. Right. So then you can scroll down. We'll just scroll through all of our actual implementations here. I think I have 8. We have an announcement message. We have our join message, error message, mystery gift sub, a gift sub, a notice message, and then we get down to these builders. Now this is our second level here. Let me just turn over my notes. And this second level, the builders, the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this private, right? Notice that it's private, and then again, our object declaration. Now this private modifier is to eliminate myself or other people doing exactly what I just did inside this main chat, right? By using these builders inside of any sort of outside code. I don't like that. It's purely design choice by me. I don't like that. I like the very clean implementations. I like how we're using the system.resub. So this private object is simply to only allow people to use the code how I want to use it, and only really allowing myself to use the code how I want to use it. Right. Now, what these builders actually represent, right? Actually, I've built another one with a dialog builder. These builders represent the most generic of all our code, right? Essentially, when you see a builder, when you see something that uses the same builder, you should understand that it has the same actual layout, right? So if we actually scroll up to our code here, we'll go back up to the very top, and we'll notice that this resub composable uses the system chat, and this sub message uses, again, the system chat. Now we should know, just by looking at that since it uses the same builder, it's going to have the same layout, which is actually going to be different from when we get to system chat alert, right? Since it uses a different builder, we'll know that it technically has a different layout. Now, technically, if we want to get fancy here, and I do want to get fancy, I've gone ahead and I've made my own little style guide just on GitHub Pages, and I've left a link here in the documentation. Now, if we actually go ahead, let me just pull up the style guide here. You can see this is just made through GitHub Pages, right? But essentially, I've left a link, so if we click on System Chat, right, I'm still building it out, right? This is very much version 1.0. Actually see here that I have done the style there, but nonetheless, essentially, when I leave this link to a system chat, it allows the user to essentially read our documentation and be like, okay, let me see what this looks like, right? And then they could say, okay, so it's generally going to follow this format, right? Let's say, okay, it takes a message header and it takes a message text, and then they could go ahead, follow this link here, and then see that this is generally the design which it's going to look like. And then also notice, right, if we scroll down to the next builder, which is the system chat alert, again, I've left a link in our documentation, so if myself or others would click on that link, it would then take us to this. Well, not now, because technically the link is broken by the looks of it, but essentially they could look at it and they could say, okay, it's going to be some sort of, right, we can see it takes a header, a text, and a button, and we could just almost say, okay, this is going to be the header, this is going to be the text, and this is going to be the button. Right, so builders essentially represent the most generic and really the layout, right? If something shares a builder, it's going to share the same layout. Right, now then we can actually move on to part 3. After we have our builders, which are the most generic, we run into the parts section, where essentially the parts are the most specific, right? The parts are actually what make up the builders. These parts, right, they represent the individual components, right? You want to be able to essentially pull parts out and put them back in. As you can see, we have our header here, the header and the message text. Actually, if we look at our style documentation, the message header is actually going to be this resub message, and then the message text is actually going to be all the stuff that we have here. Now, and also notice in the documentation, I'm just giving people a general description, right? It just says a row containing a icon and text composable. This should be used to convey quickly short and important information to the user, right? And then if we actually go down to this message text, it says the stylized text meant to convey a large amount of information to the user, right? So when people want to use it, they can just hover and they can understand what they should use it for and what they're actually giving it. Yeah, so essentially you scroll down here, we have a lot of parts. Even if these are incredibly simple, right? Like I have a simple text. I think I even have like a simple button. Yeah, button. Even if these are individual parts, like that's literally, right? This is literally just a button. I still put them inside these parts because then it allows us to stick to our style guide, right? And if you wanted, you could give a little more information to the user, right? Or you'd be a little more descriptive than the button, right? You could say, a button with an X, right? Where you could say a button with, and you could provide it a specific, image vector, like I do in this alert header, right? It just allows for a little more information for us to convey back to whoever is using this code. Now, technically, if you think about it, this is essentially us creating our own internal composable style guide, which I think is really cool. I think technically, especially once you go ahead and you create your own style guide, technically we're only like about one step away from like creating and releasing our own style guide. Now, one thing I would mention here that I didn't realize till after, I released this GitHub Pages on its own, in its own GitHub. I don't think I would do that in the future. I think I should have kept it inside of my actual project. But nonetheless, it's all right. But yeah, I would really recommend people do this. If you have a bunch of code that you're trying to use a bunch, or a section of code that you want to make a little more generic, and it has a very finite set of composables, this is what I would do. I would break it down. I'd break it down into implementation, builders, and parts. This has essentially allowed me to, I have a main chat here, right? This is the vertical chat for my app. And then I also have a horizontal chat, right? When users pivot the app, and it goes into horizontal chat. And since I have this generic code here, it allows me to essentially, as you can see here, we put in a when, and then we just use these message types, right? And then allows me to, again, just put in a when expression, and then just use the same system chats, right? So essentially, I could quite literally, just copy and paste it all over, which has really worked very good. Again, I could make this even more generic by just chucking all this stuff into its own composable, and then just using it twice in the horizontal and main chat. Yeah, right. But with that being said, I'll leave a link down in the description below for you can take a look at this. And with that, I will see you in the next one.